So this is a tire and tube change for the EVOLV Tour 2.0, and we'll take you through the list of tools that we need.
So required tools will be an 18mm open-ended wrench, an M3 Allen or hex wrench, and some side cutters just to cut a zip tie. And then there are some helpful tools that we might need, like a ratchet, parts tray, and some M4 and M5 Allen wrenches. So just to make things a little easier to visualize, I'm going to remove the rear mud guard just with an M4 Allen wrench. This isn't strictly necessary, but it might be helpful later on when we put the wheel in. And then we'll remove, cut this zip tie that's holding the motor cable. We'll just move this wire hanger out of the way, and I'm just going to pull this wire out of it. We're going to need it later on. There's no wire connection, so the wheel is going to stay attached to the scooter. Then we remove axle boots, and there's another one on this side. And next, I'm going to use an M3 on the right-hand side. And there's a screw here that locates the drum brake assembly. This needs to come out. And I'm going to pull off. You just push the lever forward. This will just come off by hand. This is holding the rear brake cable, and it's used to adjust the play and the brake lever. And the cable isn't really going to, it's mostly stuck in there until we loosen the millimeter. Remove the axle nut. And this anti-rotation washer. On the left side, you need to use an open-ended wrench because of the wider motor cable. So that nut's going to stay on. You just wiggle things to get the anti-rotation washer free. And here we need, in our case, we have the scooter on a stand. So we need a block to support the wheel. Because it's still attached with the motor cable. And brake cable is free, wheel is free. Spring, these we'll put back in. And this is there. So now that we have the wheel off, I'm just gonna pull this drum brake assembly out. It just slides right off the axle. That's all there is to it. Don't touch the shoes. You don't want to contaminate your braking surface. Now we're going to take the screws out of the rim, a little support stand here. And with your 3mm Allen screw, just gonna if you have power tools,
at this point, we have the screws out from the edge, all 6. We need to separate the rim. Both halves come apart. So on the bottom, underneath, I'm going to be pressing to break the bead. I'm pressing up to separate it. And you can see that there's a rim half here and a rim half down there. And we need to separate this one. Also pressing in here along the edges to separate it. And you need to remove the valve. And that's out. So at this point, this is all you need to do to replace the tube. Tube comes out. You need to take it off this way, away from the motor wire. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. And you can slip it out of the way. You can slip it just down over the motor and it's off. So that's all you need to do to replace the tube. The tire does not need to come off. When you put a new tube on, make sure that the valve is pointing towards the motor cable when you put it on. So it goes on like that. So from this point, after we've removed the tube, we need to take the tire off. And we only need to take the tire off if we need to change the tire. If it's worn out, if it's worn all the way down. So to do that, you're going to have to fit the tire over the motor, and you need to do this at the right angle. Straight down won't work. I've got a bit of soapy water on a rag. Put that around the edges, that'll help. Make sure you're working on a nice firm surface that's not moving. It'll be a lot harder. So, you want to make sure that this edge of the tire is under this part of the axle. And you're going to bring the tire over this way. It is a tight fit, but it does work. There we go, and the tire is off. When you're putting the tire on, you need to pay attention to the direction that it's going. We have a rotation direction. So this is going to be pointing forwards as the motor is running along. Motor cable is on the left side of the scooter. So it's going to go like this to make sure that the arrows are pointing in the right direction. Take a bit more soapy water. Make sure things are lined up right. And we're going to go down and make sure that this edge is underneath. If you start up top, it might get caught. So we're going to under. I'm going to flip it, and we're just going to pull up. If you do one side at a time, just a little bit, it makes it easier. And we're on. So we line it up now. We need the tube. So the tube goes on towards the motor cable. Tube up. Tube gets tucked inside. If you have it partially inflated, that way it sits where the halves won't pinch it. If it's deflated, the tire tube might sit like this, and it's easier for the rim halves to squish it during reinstallation. So it could pinch it. So we're going to line up. This valve has a little valley on the edge of the motor. Make sure that lines up with that. I want to put the valve through the hole in the rim. Set that down. Line it up and squish. So to put the bolts in, you need Loctite. Blue Loctite on the bolts so that they don't rattle loose over time. This one just had some, so it's good. You'll need to press down on the rim to get the halves to meet. They are too far apart otherwise because the tire is putting pressure on it. We have our 3mm. Just a couple threads to get that one locked in. Push down, do the opposite one. And now we have two. We don't need to hold down the rim anymore to get it locked in. Make sure you get all 6. Start them with a hex bit. You can use a drill, just be gentle. Finish torquing up with your Allen key. And the next part is reinstallation onto the axle. Okay, so we're going to put together everything and put it back on the vehicle. At this point, before you put everything together, it's good to check that your replacement tube is good. So pump it up. The PSI should be between 50 and 55. Make sure there's no leaks before you put everything together so you don't have to take it apart if it's failing. Brake drum goes back on the axle. This axle then needs your anti-rotation lock washer. Make sure it's in the same direction as the one on the other side. So these two that one's pointing up. I'm going to put this one facing up as well. Okay. So the vehicle is upside down right now. It makes it easier to put things into the drop. And let's see. That goes on the outside. Keep that off for now. So these two silver washers go on the inside. The anti-rotation goes on the outside. And you may need to pry the axle apart just a little bit. Okay. So you can see if this was the other way up, it would be a lot more difficult. There we go. So I just need to pry the axle away from itself to fit the motor in. If that's too much work for you, you can also loosen up down here and here to get some separation. So now that's in. Put our anti-rotation back in. Back in. We need to lock our drum brake in place. That's that one there. Before we do that, we need to get our brake cable hooked in. Just rotate a little bit. There we go. This goes on in this direction onto the end of the brake line. This is to tension the brake. So now we need to tighten down the axle. We have 1 and 2. So make sure that these down here. Make sure that these are sitting in the hole. There's a little notch for it to sit in to prevent the axle from turning during use. So that should be sitting in there. This is an 18 that we're using to tighten everything up. You can't use the closed end, you need to use the open end because of the motor cable. So we can put the boot cover back on, tuck the motor cable back in, engage the motor cable hook. Just tighten down the drum brake. And at this point, you're pretty much ready to go. Everything after this, you just need to tension your drum so that your braking is accurate.